to Can TV 21 Hotline. Let's talk etiquette. I am so pleased to be here with you once again. I feel so blessed to have this opportunity with Can TV. What a great organization this organization here is in service to the community. But before I get started on this wonderful topic we have planned for you today, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce. And I say that with such energy and vigor because it's such a wonderful person to have as my special co-host today. And that's Madam, I had to place that term on it, Madam Georgia Selmon, etiquette maven extraordinary. Welcome to Can TV, Let's Talk Etiquette.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. It is indeed a pleasure to be back here again. I enjoy the conversations and I enjoy co-hosting with you. So thank you for inviting me.
I'm so happy about that. To have this lady here with me is truly a pleasure and a joy and just such an intellectual exercise.
Thank you.
But today, Madam Selmon, as you well know, we are going to take on a little different topic. And the reason that we're going to take this topic on is because we feel it's so paramount for us to communicate out there to you and our viewing audience this whole dynamics called conservatism and liberalism. So these two terms drive all the forces that we see each and every day in our society. And so I'm going to put the show topic up for you to see it, and so that you can read along with me. And I have been chosen to read the heading on this, and Madam Selmon is going to read the smaller print. It's the philosophy of liberalism versus conservatism. And that's going to be the big, huge topic for us today. And so, Madam, if you don't mind reading the other lines on there.
Of course not. A better understanding of the two philosophies. Definition of liberal: open to new behavior or opinions and willing to discard traditional values, non-conforming, unconservative.
Unconventional, I believe.
I'm sorry, unconventional, radical, eccentric, revolutionary.
Yes.
That's what liberal is all about.
Yes, yes. And if you like to do that, you want to wait and we could read the other one a little later?
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about liberal first. Because as we all know, there's such a influence on society, the liberal view, the liberal approach to society. And we see the impact of that liberalism over the last 40, 50 years. That's the wonderful thing about having some age on you. You don't have to guess or go to a history book to kind of understand recent modern history. And I would say the last 50 years is really very recent history in terms of lifespans today as opposed to it was 100 years ago.
Yes.
So liberal is a term that has had tremendous impact on our society. And I'm going to ask my co-host here to kind of give me some of her insight on what it is, I guess, to have the liberal philosophy as part of your life.
Well, I'm sort of conservative and liberal.
Okay.
I take two positions. I'm more conservative than I am liberal. And sometimes I am non-conforming.
Okay.
And sometimes I can be a bit radical.
Right, okay.
And sometimes I can be eccentric.
Yes, yes.
And I can be a revolutionary.
Yes.
So I can be a liberal at times, and my views sometimes are liberal. So I think I'm more conservative than I am liberal.
Oh, okay.
But when it comes to certain subjects and certain topics, I can it really depends on how it affects me personally.
Yes.
What those
Yes.
issues are to me personally.
Yes.
And for example, the gun laws.
Ah.
Yes, the
Yes.
gun laws.
Yes.
I can sometimes, when I think about me being in a protective situation, I think maybe I should own a gun.
Yes.
Legally,
Right.
of course.
Right. Right.
And it frightens me that to even own a gun.
Yes.
But
yes.
I think my thought process is that maybe I should have a gun
Yes.
to protect Georgia.
Yes.
And but so that could be sort of liberal. I think more conservatively, you would just trust that your police officers and the people that governs the law will protect you. But we're living in such a society today, Mr. Wright, that the gun laws and
Right.
so I don't know.
That's what they are.
Yes.
Yes, and I can understand that. I'm a believer, and I guess that may be a liberal point. I'm a believer that a woman should have whatever object she feels is needed to protect herself.
Yes.
You cannot wait for the police to arrive when someone is assaulting you or attacking you. And I firmly believe that if you want and feel safer with a firearm, then it's your right to own one.
Yes.
And so I'm 100% behind your right to have whatever type of weapon you feel is necessary to protect yourself. And that's just a male point of view, but it's also, I'm sure, women feel the same way about that.
But the
as
point
well.
is that a liberal position or is that a conservative position? It's kind of like
Both ways. You can certainly feel protected by being a conservative in the sense that you want to make sure no one harms you and you want to take all necessary steps. But is it a liberal point of view? I think it's probably more of a conservative than a liberal. Just off the top, I guess liberals think you don't need a firearm, you don't need a weapon. I've heard some liberals make that argument that this is something that's really going to harm society. And their position is we need to be a society that's free of firearms. We need to ban them and confiscate them. And I know you heard that kind of argument by liberals regarding guns. So it's
Yes.
supposedly the conservatives who have been
exactly.
marshaling the right to have a firearm around the country. And so, but I think that liberals just don't feel you need a weapon. I don't believe that. I think that if you feel you need a weapon, then you have a right, whether it's a gun, a ice pick, or a butcher knife. Whatever
But I think the thing that really
whatever you
frightens
do.
me is that so many youth are having access to firearms, and that's the scary part.
Yes. Yes, that is very much a frightening thing. And we have seen the proliferation of firearms in our society over the last at least the last 10 years.
Yes.
But when you have a mixture of a society that is inundated with drugs and mind-altering kinds of substances, and you mix the two, a firearm and marijuana or some other kind of drug, in that person's body, and that changes their state of mind, then you're elevating and escalating the possibilities of violence being turned to as an excuse for some very simple, trivial kinds of things. People now use firearms to settle those differences,
Yes.
and that's part of that tragedy. And so, whether that's liberal or conservative, I'm kind of like on both sides of that. You need a firearm. I don't have a firearm, but you need one. You get you one if you want. Okay? So this is where we're trying to take this subject and have you participate. Perhaps next week you'll be able to call in and give your version or your opinion on this. This will be a two-part show. This is part one of that show. And so now we'll move on to the word conservatism. And what does that mean? So, madam, would you like to, I'll put it back up there,
Yes.
and you can read that one.
Of course. Holding to traditional values and attitudes and cautions about change, typically in relation to social values, politics, or religion. holding to traditional values and attitudes.
Yes. So, so that word conservatism has a little different kind of concept and values and approach to life and how you see life. And the Etiquette Foundation of Illinois would probably fall under the conservative side of those values simply because we believe in traditional
Yes.
values. And sometimes people can mix conservatism with traditional. And they are kind of like together in some sense in terms of the two words and what they both mean. But traditional values to us are those values that have evolved over the last several hundred years. They have been tried and they have been tested, and that we know that these values do work. I mean, it's not like we are trying to invent something new. These are basically traditional kinds of values. And Madam, you were in the South just recently.
Yes.
Tell us about your experience with the values of the people that's in the South that you experienced.
Very, very conventional or conservative. Very conservative, very traditional.
Yes.
And I think I was so impressed by the overall attitudes of the Southerners. And it was from the little children up to the older people. They had such mannerisms and such politeness and such traditional. That to me is traditional.
Right, traditional values.
Yes, and they adhere, and that's part of who they are. The South.
Yes.
The Southern people. That's who they are.
Yes.
And it was so refreshing to meet people that was so polite.
Yes.
And it was so natural. It was such a natural manners
Yes.
that I mean, just totally impressed me. I have not been south in many, many, many years.
Yes.
So to go there for the very first time in years and to see the hospitality and the warmth of the people, it was just breathtaking.
I can imagine.
Yes.
I've gone a number of the times, and I agree totally. There's a whole different mindset to those folks. And I guarantee you those kinds of traditional values that you see in practice there have a significant impact on the people themselves. I think there would be less violence among them, more cooperation among them, more willingness to work as a community as a whole.
Yes.
The values we once had here in Chicago,
Yes.
our parents and grandparents brought those Southern traditions up here, and our community was a replica of what was there because they brought all those values with them.
Absolutely.
But what has happened, unfortunately, over the years is this new liberalism that has taken a hold and has changed our attitudes about practically everything.
Yes.
Everything. So we at the foundation certainly want to continue to pursue our traditional value programs and concepts because we know for a fact that they do work and they are very, very effective in terms of relationships between one another, getting along, being able to cooperate with one another as a community.
Yes.
Those are the things that makes for a healthy community. And just to make you aware, back in our parents' days, you can go to a pawn shop and just purchase a gun.
Yes.
Yeah, you can just simply go in there or go to Sears or go to Penny's or go to any of them other department stores and they had a gun department.
Yes.
You just go in, how much is a gun? You just pay for it and you walk away with it. You didn't have to have a permit or a license or any of that.
Well, I don't think today that's really an issue either.
No.
I think people are just getting whatever kind of weapon they want.
A lot of under the table weapons.
And our children, the children are accessing these weapons.
Yes,
And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much crime.
absolutely.
And the concept of being conservative is just almost not even a part of what's going on in our world and affairs today.
Especially in the
Unfortunately.
North. In the North, especially.
Yes.
I don't think it's so much the same in the South. We haven't actually done any study as far as the data in terms of per 100, how many shootings there are, how many homicides there are in the South per 100 population. But we firmly at the foundation believe that this whole degeneracy in terms of those values this new model of liberalism that has made it where people now feel it's not necessary to be polite or to be courteous or to be respectful. And we think here that that is actually one of the underpinnings of the increase in the violence in Chicago. Yes. I mean, how do you get to be number one in the country in terms of homicides? Something else has to be involved, but we do know drugs are involved.
Yes.
I'm willing to go out as far as to say that every homicide, every shooting involved, especially with involving a young person, has drugs in their system. And this is why they do the kinds of insane things they do.
Yes.
And we got example after example of wanton shootings that kill innocent people, children as well as adults. They have, no sense of the danger they're in, and they end up losing their lives. And so the combination of those two, I think, is playing a significant role. What do you think, ma'am?
Well, I was at one of these schools today in the south suburbs, and it was absolutely one of the most refreshing experiences that I've had in a long time. Mm-hmm. I met some young people today, juniors and seniors, and I was interviewing them, giving them mock interviews, and thoroughly impressed. Mm-hmm. 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 And when we advocate etiquette, these young people, they demonstrated etiquette at its highest level.
Yes, yes.
They were polite.
Yes.
They had the right gestures. Mm-hmm. They spoke very intelligently. Mm-hmm. They knew exactly what and I'm sure they've had some rehearsal,
and training.
But that's what's important. That's what we need to do.
And
we need to provide rehearsals
and training. That's what we do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
yes.
It would just be nice if we can start the process a lot earlier. If it can start it in the elementary schools, teaching the importance of values and teaching the importance of manners.
Yes.
If we can start that. I saw it today, and I was very impressed.
Yes. And this happens often. We are in the suburbs as well as in the city, but we do have the occasion to really encounter some very extraordinary young people.
Absolutely.
And they are not the bulk of the majority, but they are a small number of those young kids that really been well trained, well educated. And I have to say that maybe the school did not play that big a role. I think this is from their parenting, and that environment has played a more major role than the school, because there's very little etiquette training in our schools, no matter if it's in the suburbs or in the city.
Absolutely.
So these are very precise kinds of rules that you have to first teach the child why you should do these things. What is the purpose of doing these things? They have to understand the logic behind why is it important to be polite, to be courteous, and say thank you and no thank you. Those things have to be educated into the child, because they're not getting it really anywhere else in society. It's not on your TVs. It's not in your political world where they are promoting, the importance of having good social values and good language skills and those kind of things. And so, since we don't see it in the public, domain, we know that when we see young people like you witness today, that's really the exception. That's the exception, because I say
I don't want to believe that.
If you took a typical random of 100 young people in that very school, you're going to get maybe 10-15% that's on that level.
Well, you have to remember, these were junior and seniors.
Right.
So that makes the difference as well.
Right.
Because they've gone through the process, and this was a designed program for them, teaching them I think it's a career education or something like that. It was a career education. So they were kind of prepped and
they received some training. And
received some
knowledge.
Training, absolutely.
Right.
But I think
job preparation is fundamentally what they receive.
Exactly.
Right.
But it should start much earlier. I think it should just become a part of their whole character.
Yes, absolutely. And we've taught those programs in many schools in the city as well as in the suburbs. preparing our young people for college as well as for a career.
Yes.
And we have donated suits and shirts and ties and taught them how to tie a tie. You'd be surprised how many young men do not know how to tie a tie.
Yes.
And these are seniors. These are juniors and seniors in our school. And we have gone to supposedly the better schools in the city and in the suburbs. So we know that it's pretty across the board fairly consistent. Some schools are not teaching them anything about that.
But what does it tell you?
Some schools are teaching them.
What does that tell you?
The inconsistency in our educational system.
Well, it tells me that something is lacking at home as well.
Oh, absolutely.
If a young man
foundation
does
is
not
there,
know
it's
how
very
to
difficult.
tie a tie, then I think that lesson should start from home.
Absolutely. I agree
know?
totally. In its first
Some
5 years,
father or
first 6 years,
grandfather or uncle or brother or someone needs to teach that young man how to tie a tie.
Absolutely, absolutely. But as you well know, in our schools today, that whether you're in the higher end schools, and I don't want to call any schools names out, but I'm sure if you're in the city or you're in the suburbs, you know those so-called elite schools that we have taught at and visited. The dress code has just gone, out of the window. Whereas when we were young and going to high school, we had a dress code that you could not come to school dressed in a certain way.
We were very conservative.
Conservative, right.
Now everybody's very liberal.
Coming to school and doing everything.
Not only the kids, but
Yeah,
sometimes
and
the
teachers.
staff.
Now, teachers dress professionally during our day.
Yes.
That was a career, that was a profession. If you're a teacher, that's a profession.
Yes.
And you had standards of dress attire that you had to adhere to, be you female or male.
Absolutely.
But that's gone out of the window. I see teachers with earrings in their ears, and these in high schools too.
Yes.
And shirts out of their pants, no tie, just looking really unbelievable. And you want to know why the children are role modeling the way they are. We're not getting a lot of encouragement from the staff in many of these schools. So this liberal approach to society, we want to know what you think about that and how that has affected you. How do you see the effects of liberalism on society versus traditional values or conservative values? So that's a question we feel is so important for us as a community to begin to try to have some understanding, some sense of what these two forces have done to us and where have we gone over the last 50 years in this whole degrading, I like to consider. But you may think of it in a different way.
Well, we've called it degrading and we've called it dumbing down.
Right.
Barbarism.
Oh, right.
We could come up with some names.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
But it's all about what can be done to create a society where people respect one another again and respect one another's values and principles. And I think that should apply to any conservative or any liberal person. I hate to think that being a liberal, you don't think in terms of manners, and you don't think in terms of integrity. I mean, like I said, sometimes my thoughts are liberal, and sometimes I'm more conservative than I am liberal. But I have had some times when I have thought as a liberalist.
And some of these policies are very inviting and titillating, if I must say. But if you look at the overall scope of what has took place over the last 50 years, and we've gone through all kinds of transitions that would be considered liberal transitions. But when you look at the data now and you look at the consequences that we have as a community now, I mean, how do you weigh those? I mean, have we really progressed or have we digressed as a society, as a community? And I fail to see it in this next generation where you and I are there. We're in the schools. We see it from the higher end of the student body down to the lower end of the student body. And we are working with some of these young people that's in the alternative school. And these are some bright young people, but what we see when we go in there is sometimes just make you feel so bad when the attitude of these young people,
Lack of
and
motivation.
lack of motivation, they just seem to be so depressed and have no sense of what they want to do or how they should do it. But just give us some of your thoughts on what we witness, especially with the alternative kids, because we know they're great, great young people.
Well, it depends. It's a day-to-day thing. And some days, some of the students are very motivated, very engaging, and participating. And sometimes they're very laxed and uninterested. And but that's where our challenge comes in.
Yes, yes, yes.
We do what we need to do to get their attention. I think we have greater impact, and I think we are more successful than not. And I'm saying it because we've been there, and we stay there until the very end, and the end is what determines, whether or not we've had success or not. And we had great success.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It takes a while.
It takes a while.
But if we stay with it, and we have done that, we have been so impressed with the turnaround in the principals and in the school, the teachers in the school. The superintendent has just gave us such great applause for the success we've had with these young people who were destined to go out, get kicked all the way out of school, get suspended, and not excuse me, and not even be able to get into another alternative school.
Right.
And so that's the first step on their way to prison.
And our position is conservative.
Conservative.
We take a very conservative position, and they're all eyes because they're interested in saying, what are these old folks going to try to tell us?
Tell us, right.
And believe it or
they have
not,
all the answers already. They do.
they are receptive. They are engaging, and that's what we want. Because at that point, we know that we are making impact.
A difference.
Yes.
Yes. And
Absolutely.
what we basically do, we just simply break down the process so that they understand the values that go into being, a good person, a polite, courteous, respectful person. Once we teach and show them what those values are and what's the rationale behind why you should do and react and present yourself in this manner, how people would judge you, they immediately get that, and then, they are just on another total track.
Yes.
Let me put our thing up here before we get to a point where we aren't able to get our information out there. Let me put it up there right quick, and we'll go from there. You can reach us at 312-473-2942, or you can email us at info@efoi.org. And so this show is about these two forces that has created the last 50 years of our society. Next week, we're going to take on a very interesting subject, and that is the legalization of marijuana. And fortunately, we do have one of our state representatives, Mr. Anthony DeLuca, who is opposed to the legalization of marijuana. So we want to present his argument next week to you as to why he is opposed to the legalization of marijuana. And I think if you tune us in, you will find that show to be very, very interesting. And the data he's developed is almost unquestionable.
Yes.
What side he's on. I won't tell you today what side he's on, but hopefully next week we'll have him call in. That's our goal and objective, and have him give us a call here at the station, and so that we can let him tell us a little about what has motivated him to take on this grand subject of legalizing of marijuana. With that said, I will turn it over to Madam Selmon to close out the show. Madam, would you do us the honors?
Yes. Thank you for tuning in. Come back, check us out. We've enjoyed the subject, and we hope that you have enjoyed us as well. Have a good night.
Thank you, and good night.